I'm going to call this Streets Committee meeting to order July 16th, 2018. We'll stand for the pledge. Court, you want to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll, please.
Hayes. Carter. Here. Walter.
Here. Okay. First item on our agenda is, this is one that we had talked about a little while ago regarding the questions for Mr. Zetz regarding Stan Tech. I had put a few questions together. I sent those out late this afternoon. I don't know if you had a chance to look at those, Mel.
I didn't. I haven't looked at anything this afternoon. Not since like 1 o'clock.
Okay. I had forwarded them, BJ, I think I forwarded them to BJ and to Suzanne also.
Okay.
Kind of one of those where I guess if you have any additional ones, if you'll add to them,
Okay.
or, and that's what Suzanne said that she was gonna do also, if you have any additional ones.
Okay.
But in general, these questions are basically, they're ones of typical engineering contract questions. Using knowledge basically for plans and looking at the Mink 2 project as well as the Main Street project. So I don't know if you had any comments, BJ, on them. Pretty straightforward.
Well, I just had a quick minute to scan them,
Okay.
haven't done much.
I did not give them Mr. Zetz yet because I was hopeful to get
Yeah,
kind
it
of
should come,
everybody's kind of
as we
combined.
talked about at the last meeting, send them to me and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I'm
All right.
sorry. I haven't had it. I didn't get to look at that yet, and I'm sure you probably covered a number of the same things that I was thinking, because mine are probably a little
Well, I
lower
hope,
level.
well, I have a
Question.
feeling when you see them or get a chance to review them, I think they're pretty much what we talked about.
Okay.
So, okay, number 2, retention, detention, basin enforcement. This is essentially a question from past review of the ordinances. Have we done anything more with, and I know this would be mostly involving the KFC area or some other businesses that have detention basins. So have we done anything to enforce, or at least ask them to be in compliance?
Well, I'll let BJ start this one since he's
Okay.
ready.
We have a meeting at 10 or 11,
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock on Thursday with KFC. We called, got a number for them, talked to them. They're well aware of the complaints that they're receiving. They said it's been 20 years that they've been receiving them. They told me they're reasonable people, and if there's issues, they will certainly fix them. Told them the issues may be above my head to comprehend, so we're meeting out there with one of the owners of the franchise on Thursday at 10 a.m.
Okay.
So we'll be able to follow up after that with how that discussion goes and what the plan is moving forward.
Were there any other businesses that we should be looking at?
Not that I'm aware of, unless you have any other to mention. Specifically with that one, our code regarding stormwater regulations was put into effect in 2006. KFC, Taco Bell, they were there prior to 2006. So it's not really an enforcement issue because our code doesn't apply to that. But we'll certainly, like we would with any resident concern, meet with them and try and see if we can't arbitrate, I guess, a mutually agreeable solution.
Conversation I had, they're willing,
Right.
they're willing to be a good neighbor, and if there's stuff they need to fix with their basin, they're willing to do it. They said in the past they've had storm lines cleaned out, had some repairs made, but they're certainly willing to listen what needs to be done and do what they need to do to be a good neighbor.
Great. Mel?
Was there more than one resident with issues along that area
Not that I'm aware
that
of.
we've heard from?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
There's one neighbor who has an issue from them. There was another neighbor, his neighbor, who had an issue with something in his front yard. We went in and regraded it when we cleaned out the ditch, and seems not to be an
That
issue
was
anymore.
okay.
So we have the one neighbor directly behind who's having the issue.
Okay.
All right, great. Anything else from that, Mel?
Mm-mm.
Anything else on that, Alan?
Nope.
Okay. The Linking, okay, number 3, the Linking Heights school improvements. I know we received a traffic study, summary of the traffic study And I wondered if, I don't know, if you want Jobs to comment on that, or do you want to speak to this at all? Individual items?
I
I've got
mean,
a couple
certainly if,
questions.
you know, if we want somebody not on the committee to speak, I want a motion for that. I do think it's important as city engineer for Jobs to make some comments. They reviewed it, we got it, we shared it with them. We have met with the school district to talk about it. And Jobs has reviewed it. Jim Roberts is here from Jobs, so if we want somebody from other than committee or staff to talk, we need a motion to do that.
I'll make a motion that we have Mr. Roberts speak to the summary that he has given, as well as the meeting that he may have had.
I second.
Walter?
Yes?
Carter?
Yes.
All right. Jim, you want to give us a review and then let us know what came out of the meeting?
So thank you. Happy to talk about this topic. We got a 287-page traffic impact study from Licking Heights School District, so they did put in a lot of effort to have that done. That's kind of a Cadillac version of a study, but if you're familiar with the site layout that they're proposing access to their new complex, we'll call it, which will be a high school and middle school, off of all three of the roads that it kind of sits, so off of Summit, off of Cable, and off of Mink. And so there's a lot of moving pieces and parts when you start talking about adding that kind of traffic to an already busy area. And so we basically broke our review of the traffic study into two different pieces. The first piece was sort of comments on the study itself. And we had a few, there were some details that we questioned. There were some, typos or things of that nature. My gut feeling is that none of those things would have a major impact on their findings and conclusions and recommendations. So we want to make sure that, we wanted to throw those back at them and have them make sure they analyze things correctly, but we suspect that there probably won't be a lot of changes.
Hey, Jim, just on that section alone, just a quick question on number 9, you say the numbers don't add up. Are these minor things where they didn't add up by like maybe 10 or something, or were they off by, hundreds?
Some of the numbers were off by a lot, but again, they have a whole bunch of tables that show like arrow, 528 right turning cars and 672 through cars or whatever, and the math of those things needs to add up. All the cars heading that way need to end up somewhere.
They didn't manufacture
But
cars.
they didn't all, yeah, and so, but I wouldn't say that, again, I don't think I felt like those were major problems with the quality of the study, so, and again, with the number of pages that they had, I think that's just something that happens.
And for what it's worth, I work out there, so I watched them sit out there forever. I mean, they were there forever. And, in a half a dozen different spots. I mean, like, they would sit at this one entrance of the school and then off Summit and then other places, so I could see where, as they started to explain things, that it would get confusing.
Sure.
Because I would even at times thought, the heck are they sitting over there for?
Right.
But okay, so.
Right. And so then the challenge of this study is, now we kind of have the existing traffic. We have to project the future traffic, how much traffic is going to be generated by a new high school, a new middle school, how many of those cars are going to use this driveway, that driveway, what's going to be the internal traffic flow, in terms of if you want to get to the new high school over on Summit, can you turn in off of Mink in the driveway and just sort of zig and zag through the property, or do you have to come all the way around Cable? And so there is a lot to that. But I guess getting past that piece of it, the things that I think were really important, that internal traffic, which is not really finally designed and identified, but they did say that there will be internal access all around because they think that'll be better for them. All of their recommendations were based on a staggered start time for the high school and the middle school. So if you think about the high school kids arriving at 7 o'clock in the morning, the middle school kids need to arrive at 7:45. That way all the cars for both aren't coming at once. That creates a busing problem. A challenge for, usually the high school, middle school kids are all in the same buses. And so we did ask in the meeting that they commit to a staggered start time of at least a half an hour. Otherwise, all the results and recommendations are pretty much void and we need to start from scratch. So that was a big piece of the study that we thought was important. Yeah, BJ?
So so with the staggered start, the findings were based on that. So we would need a commitment based on the findings that would be in 2020, I think it is, that staggered starts would occur
Correct.
for the foreseeable future.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and really, in our eyes, is the city forever.
Do you know if they do that now, BJ? Did they mention if they have staggered start?
They do not have
They do
staggered
not.
start
Okay.
times now because we,
But at the
because of
same
busing.
time, you've got people going to different
Right,
locations. You've got the middle school on Summit Road, and then you've got the high school up on
Cable.
Cable Road, where these are gonna be right next to each other, where you have both on cable.
There is a difference, but I think it's like 10 minutes.
I just wondered how hard it would be for them to adjust to do it.
It's a doable
Opinions, but
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a doable thing. It's complicated, but it's complicated the other way as well. If they don't stagger, it gets complicated for them as
Yeah.
well. So I guess then the other piece of what I put in my review letter, was just sort of some, we as the city, I think there's some things we wanna consider, some of which work to the advantage of the school district, some of which work to the disadvantage of the school district, but I think are important for us to sort of keep in mind. One of which was the most complaints I asked the schools, and it was very consistent with what Alan and BJ had already said. Where do you have problems now? And the problems are now at Havens Corner. And Havens Corner is not part of this study. So, we're looking at all the roads that are gonna be directly impacted by touch, but we still have the situation that will only get worse if we had this, another school there, to the Havens Corner intersection. So I think we all need to keep that in mind as something that we're gonna be needing to talk about as we go. I guess I'll just kind of go through my items 12 through 16, because I think they all kind of are important for you folks. Number 13, by definition, the school district is a developer. They're constructing development, we're gonna do drainage review, we're gonna do water and sewer review, we're gonna do all those sorts of things. And the city has regulations for development. And so, at the start, as this thing begins, they should follow all the same rules that any other developer of a commercial complex, of residential, whatever, should follow. And it's important to understand, because we don't always think of that as what a school district is. I would then reverse myself and say, they're not really always gonna need to be looked at as a developer, because there are some other unique things about them. They did indicate in the traffic impact study that some improvements at Summit and Cable are necessary whether the new school goes in there or not. I'm sure the purpose of that being in the study was, we think the city should fund whatever upgrades need to happen at that. And so that was pretty clear, and that did come up in the meeting a couple times, if I recall, BJ, that
It did.
they wanted to kind of make sure we were aware of that, and that's okay, that's fine. And they even actually tried to look at the numbers, assuming the existing high school wasn't there, which I thought was an interesting caveat, and really that didn't indicate there would be much of a need for any improvements. They did note at Summit and Cable that the best way to get efficient flow through there is through a roundabout. And we don't have a lot of roundabouts in Pataskala. That would be a sort of an urban or a rural feel area where you're adding a roundabout. You might think of the Morse Road in 62, which is a giant roundabout. So for traffic flow analysis, I completely agree, and we are a company that's in favor of roundabouts in the proper applications. My only comment to the city is we should think seriously about whether we feel like that is a good thing for us at that location. BJ?
Real quick, and I remember in the meeting, there was a concern brought up about, from the board or parents or something, about having younger drivers navigate roundabouts.
Yeah.
Is that how you remember? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I even kind of piggybacked onto that and said,
You did.
it is a challenge. My concern would be there's a lot of traffic southbound on Summit that wants to keep going southbound on Summit. Now, they all have to bump out, slow down, bump out, and make the turn, and they may not really wanna bump out, so then they're clipping the edge of the inner circle of the roundabout and all that sort of stuff, so. I think that's something that we just wanna seriously consider as we move forward.
If I could add to something real quick with that, I guess when we're talking about that particular area, I'm thinking even beyond just the school being out there, with everything that's going on, you know, north of Cable up on Beach and in the various areas, the traffic flow is still something that we need to, as a city, keep our eye on, even if they didn't have a school there. Traveling that in the mornings, I can tell you, when I'm trying to turn onto, if I try to turn on, right onto Havens Corners from Taylor, it takes, oh my goodness, because you know there's really no turn lanes, and the people who are trying to turn left to head towards Gehanna, it backs way up. So people from all over are using Havens Corners as an artery back and forth. And so the residents there, you know, you add in the school traffic and the kids getting to school on buses, and it just backs it up even worse. So I think it's an issue even when school's not in session, that we just need to be aware of, because I think it's something we're gonna have to deal with. So.
Right on.
Something I wanted to mention about that specifically, and I haven't added this to my council report yet, the conversation's just been started within the past month or so, partly because of this, is there's roughly 5 intersections, I would say, that I've got complaints on and looked at and think that they're issues. What I'd like to do as part of the budgeting process to start to look at this is try and run studies, get whatever MORPC counts are available, or do some counts ourselves to identify the top 5, look at those intersections, identify, prioritize them to see what would be the best to do first, and then do some engineering work, and then try to get some OPWC funding to help us out with those and start knocking those off the list as we move forward.
That's a great idea, because the interesting part about the couple of those intersections, you know, Summit and Cable, there's residents right there. I mean, there's 2 driveways that are now people who actually, you know, live in, and there's another one coming. Same at Taylor and Havens Corners. There's a house right there, and so there's residents who are directly impacted by the traffic that comes through there. So, I mean, whether an improvement is good for them or not, I don't know. You know what I mean? Whether it makes it worse or whatever it may be. But I think that's just, we really need to pay attention to those areas where we're gonna have congestion, but we also, it used to be very rural, and there were not, you know, a lot of problems getting out of your driveway. And there is now, so that's a great idea.
So my last point, probably the one I would say is the most important for us as the city to be sort of chewing on. And that is, while by definition the schools are a developer, they are a public entity. They are a partner with the city in a lot of different things that we do. So I think it's okay for us to, in certain pieces of this evaluation, look at them a little differently from a typical developer. Their analysis is based on peak hours, like 7 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. The other 22 hours of the day, they're not really causing the kinds of problems that a developer of a commercial property would do for like a 14-hour window during the course of the day. So I think that the city needs to have in mind a little bit of flexibility and reasonableness. That also allows us the I guess, comfort of possibly phasing in improvements or delaying them because the schools are fighting budget, the city's fighting budget. There's just not a pot of money there to do, you know, I'm gonna guess their traffic improvements are probably a $3 million, if you add them all together, it's probably a $3 million. I've never done an estimate, but that'd be my guess. And so I think that we as the city can have some flexibility on that. I'm sorry, BJ.
Oh, just a second, BJ. When you say $3 million, are those traffic improvements that they're planning on doing, or traffic improvements that their report shows that they should probably do? Is that?
That the report shows.
The report shows, okay, good.
Oh, and,
I just wanted to clarify that.
lost my train of thought now.
Okay, I got one other quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you know, Jim, do you know under the other, when the first high school was built out there,
Mhm.
do you know if there was any traffic studies done at that point? Does anybody been able to produce a traffic study then?
I have not seen one.
No, and, we have not, and I know this traffic impact study addresses their current school on Cable and some improvements that need to be made to, for access to that school and make it safer. And I don't know when that school was built, but I'd be
That long?
surprised if there was any
2000.
traffic impact study done.
Six.
06, 07, sometime in there?
I'd be shocked if there was one done,
Okay.
just based on just the short turn lane. If you look at even, the recommendations extending that turn lane that is there now.
The reason why I'm asking is if they had one that said there should be things done, Jim, I'm going to your point. If they had one that said you have to do, you should do X, Y, and Z, and then the city said, you know, do a little bit less than that or do less than that, and then to have it show that that should have been done for that thing, that's just something to keep in mind as we go
Sure.
through these. What is our level of, for lack of a better word, level of acceptable, or what's the acceptable level of improvements?
Sure.
So, to be safe, and not to be talking about it 10 years later saying the city should do improvements because the school was built there 10 years ago. And that's, I'm only just trying to evaluate it, because as you say, these are partnerships. They're not, you know, the city shouldn't go out and do it, in my opinion, 10 years later have to go out and do it because the school's there. And then to your point, maybe the school shouldn't have to do it immediately when it's not proven that they're needed.
Sure.
So, okay, very good. Anything else, did you remember?
I don't,
Okay.
so.
So-
Do you have something?
I was gonna comment on the, being that there's a turn lane there, my guess is that something was done, but I don't know what to what level, and I haven't seen anything for it.
And Jim, can you tell me, was there discussion about, traffic outside of the peak, just the school times? Because the school is, we joke out there that it's a 24/7 operation because of all the activities. I mean, there's a church that operates out of there on Sundays. There's sports all the time. If there's not, a game going on, there's a practice or there's some kind of a camp or marching band or whatever it may be. So it seems like, there's a pretty regular flow of traffic through that area. Did that come up at all?
It comes up, but very little because it's not the peak hour.
Okay,
So it is factored in and then it's kind of factored back out.
I got you.
And the recommendations for improvements are based on the peak hour. And so, it is a little bit, and I made the comment, I think, and I don't know if I said it in here, but I might have said it at the meeting, you know, a football game, generates a huge amount of traffic and everybody leaves at once. But it's also 11 o'clock on Friday night when nobody else is wanting to use those roads. So schools are just a very unique traffic generator because they're a ginormous generator
Right,
at these weird times. Churches generate them on Sunday morning,
right.
nobody else is on the road on Sunday. So there's a lot of balances. In one sense, I would say that we're sort of early in this process and we're just introducing the sort of the picture to you. In another sense, I think they said they wanted to open the school
2020,
2020.
school year
And
2020.
If you think about the time frame to put together construction projects and build them and things like that, we're not that early in the game. So I think some decisions may be needing to come forth, you know, probably, certainly this year.
That's what I was just gonna add, go, you remember? Go ahead.
Yeah, I remember now. So when we met with the schools, they talked, their engineer and architect were there and they were gonna start implementing some cost estimates to do some of these, cause I made the same comment. We're talking about all of this, but we don't know what the scope, what the cost is of these improvements. So, the school said they would start working on cost estimates for these improvements that were found, necessary in the traffic study.
Okay.
And just last question for you guys, is that something you guys plan on meeting with them in the next couple weeks?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna
Or
continue
did they give a
discussion
timeframe?
with the schools about this, you know, follow up, what have they found, what are the costs, and, you know, we sat there and we talked about what needs to be done, and again, the one thing missing is, what is the cost? I mean, that's pretty important when we're talking about this.
Right.
BJ, were there any, I know when we had an initial discussion, the comment was made that the school felt pretty strongly that these weren't theirs to pay for, these weren't their items to pay for. Do you know if that softened at all? Do you think that they are?
I believe it has. I
Okay,
think
good.
when you start to look at, you know, that comment and some of those things were made based on, not knowing, and if I remember, we were talking about this at the council meeting, I said, let's take a time out and see what we're exactly
We're
talking
talking
about.
about before the traffic study. too.
Right,
So
right.
maybe that changed some
Right.
opinions.
And I
Okay.
think as we continue to talk about this and look at it, get cost estimates, who's responsible for what, I think the traffic study helps answer several questions with some of that. So yeah, I would say it is softened.
Are they gonna respond to your comments, Jim, do you know?
I have not shared them with them
Oh,
yet
okay.
because I wanted to talk about it at this level first before we send it on.
After reviewing them, I think they're, and I'd like to hear Alan's opinion on it, but I think they're pretty valid, points. I think they were very good points, quite frankly.
And I pretty much agree with just about everything that Jim's had to say. The only other thing that I would point out as well, I think an impact study here was appropriate. Historically, I guess what we've done with development is things that are outside of the immediate area of their improvement, so say the intersections, we have not required developers to improve intersections based on their development. So what is appropriate in my mind from what we've done traditionally is for the access improvements for the school to do, which would be at the accesses to the old high school, become the middle school and the new high school. Just what we've done so far. So I don't know if they thought we intended for them to do the intersection improvements, but like I said, from what we've done historically, I don't see that as being a requirement in my mind at least.
But if they're willing to study them, should we not know that information? I mean, wouldn't that be a good thing? In essence, if they're willing to put them in, they've got them in their study already, right?
They put them in the study, yes.
Yeah, so, okay,
Yeah. They included the entire stretch there. if you wanna
except
call
for
it that.
the intersection at Havens and Summit, correct?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so I guess maybe that one's one that, maybe they're, to your point, Alan, they don't go back and study it,
Right.
essentially. Okay.
Havens Corners.
Yes, Havens Corners, not Havens, sorry.
Just my last comment, I thought BJ and Alan did a good job of heading off any major expectations of city funds flowing their way for whatever they want. That came up in the discussion. And what we touched on was where the city can be, again, a partner with them, is the flexibility of some of the timing and some of the other things that might not necessarily be something the city would wanna do with any other developer. So I think the a little bit of a jockeying for position kind of thing, and it was generally a productive, positive meeting, but there's just a lot out there that somebody's gonna have to find funding for.
So do you want some kind of motion from us to share this with them, or do you?
No, I just
Yeah.
wanted, I don't think
Okay.
that's necessary.
Yeah, I
You know,
know.
typically we would share engineering review comments with developers. But I wanted to just have this discussion before we send it on to them.
Perfect, fair enough.
And I just wanna add that I appreciate, the efforts the administration makes, cause I know that, when you have two bodies who are both strapped for money, that it can get a little contentious. And so, the efforts to emphasize that it is a partnership, that we all have the exact same goal. And, there's nothing adversarial. So I really do appreciate that. That, makes my job a little easier in a lot of ways.
And I'll just echo Jim's comments. It was a very good meeting. It was a very, very good meeting and good discussion during the whole thing, so.
Did you guys talk any about the improvements needed for emergency access from Mink Road? Because I know that.
We did.
Okay,
we
good.
talked
And
about-
I'm sure that's already on their radar, but.
Yeah, well, if you look on Mink Road, right now, if you're talking about where the barn or whatever that old building is,
Yeah.
there, it's addressed in the traffic study.
Yeah, they
And
talked
all
about
that's
it.
needed is, they're gonna tear the building down, all that's needed is a stop sign. Based on that, and they said the school's gonna improve that as emergency access, and also the other access on Summit, was it? Only needs a stop sign as well, if I remember correctly.
Correct. Yeah, I thought they had commented on that.
Okay.
The north-south entrances to both campuses only need stop signs, so no big deal whatsoever.
Okay. Anything else on that item? No? Anybody?
I'm good.
All right, go on. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Going on to number 4, Oak Meadow Drive update. Saw in your report, Alan, the update on plans, where those are for the review process, and also saw your update on the easement issue for the storm.
Yes.
Has a certified letter gone out to that gentleman yet?
Certified letter has gone out, got the green card back today and got a call from him. We have a meeting with him
Okay.
on 8 AM on Thursday.
I did some research. He looks like he's maybe a night, he may work a third shift.
He does, yeah. He has a
works third
very short period of time in the morning. He said between 8 and 10.
shift. That's what I was
And I
gonna
said, we'll
suggest.
see you at 8 AM. So we're meeting with him on Thursday. He has to meet out there so we can walk it. I explained what we need.
Sounds like he's amenable.
Yeah.
Just get it, yeah,
Just a
right.
matter of touching base with him and getting together with him. So 8 AM on Thursday, we'll be out there with him.
Okay, and then.
And if we already have all the documents drawn up, we'll be taking them with him.
Go.
So if he's willing to sign them, we'll be good to go.
Awesome. Regarding the, so there was a letter to the residents, giving them an update. Is that something that we plan on doing for the next couple months, at least keeping everybody updated with a letter? Or I mean, it's not, I don't think it has to be revised but just updated so that, go ahead.
I think so, not to that extent, but what has happened from that point forward. I know there was discussions, and I know we have some residents here. I don't know if the committee.
That's number 3 on the list.
Okay,
Yep.
I'll stop there.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we were, I think it's a good idea I thought that letter was good for the residents and to keep them updated as this thing is maybe pushed back a little bit further for a bidding and construction being 19 necessarily.
Absolutely.
Just keeping them up to date. All right, so the other question was the question raised at council last meeting, the 5-foot concrete path versus the 8-foot asphalt path. I just wanted to kind of review that. The question was asked, I guess, Alan, you've heard this question.
Yes.
Does it make sense if the residents are asking for a concrete sidewalk versus an asphalt path? My recollection was the path was more of a was a shared use path, more than just a sidewalk. So that made it a little more difficult, in my opinion, to go from an 8-foot path to a 5-foot sidewalk. But the next question is, is there any thought to this to make it a sidewalk and then do some kind of bike lane on the roadway? Anyhow, those were kind of my thoughts on it. Go ahead.
And I will say, through the iterations of all of this, we've looked at everything from doing nothing to a shared bike lane marked. I think there were some concerns about right-of-way and drainage and everything with doing a shared bike lane. What you mentioned at the last council meeting is that one of the concerns about Oak Meadow is people going to the park, whether it's kids or people, riding their bikes, walking, strollers, whatever. So we said, how can we get people there safely?
Right.
And look at the most multi-use way we can do that. And we came up with path. Certainly, cost is one thing, but also looking what best serves that area to get people to park. We thought, through all of this, street committee, council, administration, thought the asphalt path was the best way to provide that safety going to the park.
And if I'm not incorrect, I think it's only on one side, correct?
Correct.
So maybe it makes more sense to be, if it were sidewalks on both sides, that could be maybe a little different argument, but, so, go ahead. If you have more.
No, I don't, I was just.
So Alan, you weren't here on the last meeting, so what's your input on the 8-foot path versus the 5-foot sidewalk?
Well, I would say my recollection is pretty much the same. We did that because the resident concern was for not only pedestrians but for bike traffic, and that's why we thought the shared use path would be the most appropriate to use here. And we are keeping everything within the right of way, so, and we have, the drainage is based off of what we already have, so if we could change that where we're trying to add in a bike lane, that would, at this point, require a fair amount of redesign.
I guess I wasn't stating maybe a bike lane, but something.
One versus the other for the
Yeah.
off stream.
Yeah, I don't, but, so my recollection, this has been discussed for a year about a shared use path.
Mhm.
And I think that we came down on that through a lot of debate, and, all right, go ahead, Jay.
Well, and one thing, and I don't know if this carries any weight, sidewalks residents become responsible for clearing
That's true.
snow,
That's true. Path
fixing
they don't.
everything. A path they don't.
That's correct,
So,
that is very
I
true.
don't know if
I
that
was
has-
going to ask that very question.
Yes.
Who would be
Yes.
responsible
Yeah,
for
the
the
path
maintenance
is not
and
theirs,
the
not
path
their
would be
responsibility.
on the
No.
city?
Yeah,
Okay. I did not realize that.
yes.
Okay,
Change your opinion?
So-
No.
Joking.
Mel, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I have the same thing after it was brought up at the last council meeting and I had some time to think about it. It was, over time that we had discussed the asphalt path and the reason and the multi-use, really.
It's- yeah,
So,
yeah. Okay,
sure.
anything else? Would you like to address, the committee at all? You're
Well,
welcome to if you'd
if
like to,
we-
we gotta make a motion.
We gotta
but-
make a motion if you would like to, so
If
if
you
you
would
want
like to, I
to,
can-
let us know.
Okay.
Share a couple comments.
Mel, I'm
Okay.
gonna go ahead and make a motion. Mr. Robertson, is that correct?
Rath.
Robert Rath.
Rath, I'm sorry.
Rath.
Mr. Rath would be able to speak in front of the committee,
A second.
all right?
Walter?
Yes?
Carter?
Yes.
And I'm gonna ask for your address and the correct name.
Okay, my name is Robert Rath, R-A-T-H. I live at 310 Oak Meadow Drive, and I've resided at that residence for 48 years. I was one of the first ones to live on that address, and the oldest as at this point. I appreciate your concern for the traffic that you speak of, bicycle or foot. And I can assure you that the only time we have any fair amount of foot traffic on the street, 4th of July and fireworks. Okay? I sat there this year and watched it, and with the police involvement and everybody headed one direction, everyone's out on the street. When they leave, the majority of it is, vehicle, some walking. And as far as bicycle traffic on that street, the majority of I've seen come through that street are bike clubs or whatever they are. You're looking at 12, 15 bikes headed north into the park or wherever they end up going. And they're out on the street, okay? My concern is you're adding 8 foot of asphalt, and what it wasn't clear to me, Alan, was that contiguous with the road, or was there green space separating that path from the street?
It is separated by green space and drainage.
Okay. Again, knowing and observing the traffic there, and sometimes, and they don't obey the 25 mile an hour speed limit there. I wouldn't be surprised to see someone try to pass somebody in an automobile on that path. I'm sorry, I've seen it all. I've lived there long enough to see that. As far as, concrete versus asphalt, the only thing that I will offer to you is I drive around Pataska as a village, when it was a village and now it's a city. Everywhere we have people, we have businesses putting in concrete and not asphalt. And I feel as though I'm being treated as a second-class citizen by you putting asphalt, 8 foot of asphalt in front of my house. And I'll be quite blunt with you. I don't want it. I don't want it. I would rather see you come in and fix the drainage problem and put it back the way it was intended and fix the road and be done with it. I do not want the asphalt from it. And I'm speaking for myself and the other 3 residential properties to the south of me. I've already spoken to them, and they're willing to come to a council meeting and share their concerns. I can't speak for the rest of the way down or south on Oak Meadow because there are duplexes and businesses, okay? So I can only speak for 4 of us residents, and all of us would prefer to have concrete like the rest of the subdivisions in Pataska. So it's kind of how I feel,
I
and,
understand. Well, definitely appreciate your comments,
all
sir.
right.
One quick question for you, Alan. The path that comes in behind Dollar General,
Yes.
do you happen to know what width that is offhand?
I do not.
The blacktop path?
Yeah.
5 foot? Yeah,
I'm-
I was gonna say 6,
I
it's
think
not
it's pretty, so I'm just
pretty
asking that.
narrow.
Yeah.
And we would, all right, so it's not an 8 foot path back there.
No, and we have some commercial developments putting in asphalt paths now, but Mr. Rath is correct, I don't think we have any in subdivisions that are 8 foot paths like that, I can think of.
Actually, it could be 6, the grass has grown over it so much that it could be down to 5, but it's blacktop asphalt.
I don't really have anything else on it, go ahead.
When I do think the discussion about having a path versus sidewalk was based on the pedestrians, bicycles, everything going to Foundation Park. I remember talking about all the people that walk there, ride their bikes for soccer, or whatever it is, so we need to keep that in consideration.
All right.
I'll say, to your point, it's only on one side of the road.
And it's on one side of
It
the
is.
road, and I would imagine changing it at this point is gonna cause some engineering challenges. Just with you have to redo your handicap ramps, you're gonna have to redo your design for, you know, where your toe slopes are, that kind of stuff.
I think it could be done, it wouldn't be terrible, but
Yeah, I
it would
agree.
cost a little additional money and.
It would be an additional cost to do that
Yes.
at this point.
Well, go ahead.
And I just wanna say, and I appreciate your comments and your, preferences from having lived there as long as you have, cause I completely understand that. I will say that I do have a concern about the amount of money that this project has turned into from where we started. And we have a lot of drainage areas that need addressed and a lot of things going on. So while a change in what we're doing now might seem like a small amount of money to upgrade to something else or to change engineering or to look at things again, you know, it's adding to that overall large amount of money that we've ultimately come to do this when we have a number of other things to do as well. So I think we just need to keep in mind that it's definitely not that we, personally, from my own standpoint, that, I don't take into consideration what you guys like or what's, you know, your quality of life there and what goes on there. But when we look at everything, I have to look at the city as a whole when it comes to the money and the projects and the number of things that are going on. So for me, at this point, to change anything, I would not be in favor of that.
Well, and I would add one more thing, you know, when we went back and looked at the lane widths,
Right.
we're still not at 11, what are we, 10-foot lanes?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, so we're still narrow, which you would think for a normal collector or, you know, residential roadway, it's still pretty narrow.
Pretty narrow.
So, okay. All right, let's go on, we're almost halfway through. Main Street electric easement, what, can you tell us anything about that, BJ?
I certainly can. Those residents also received certified mail, have not received them back yet. I have a call tomorrow morning with AEP, Chad Miller, to talk about options for rerouting. They're having their engineers take a look at that. We'll be discussing tomorrow. It could very well be providing, well, I shouldn't say very well, could be. The other option is to provide service from the back. Looking at that, what that would mean for residents, it may mean setting poles in their backyards. And if that is the case, the residents will be told whether they want it underneath out front or a pole in their backyard.
And that was the
Yeah.
second part to this, was
Yep.
that potential reroutes, are we working those kind of
We are.
simultaneously?
Yeah, I'll know more tomorrow, can update committee. I have an 8:30 call tomorrow with AEP to discuss those very things.
Okay. Anything? Alan, do you have anything down to add to that? All right, good. Drainage projects. So this one was put on the agenda. I know in your report, Alan, you mentioned that the committee had gotten at least a list of all the drainage issues, but I think we were still looking for a prioritizing priority type of summary. Is that, I don't know that I have that yet or not.
Okay, well, initially, my take was that I had prioritized them in the order that they show up on the list. After taking a second look at that and considering what I was looking at to prioritize them, I don't know that that's necessarily the case now. I was originally looking at partially funding-wise, you know, how much it costs to do the project, and also the amount of concern or, you know, maybe the political aspect of it, how much we've heard about it. But looking at them from adding another perspective of, you know, what's the most important for the city, what affects city infrastructure, I've actually marked that up this afternoon, and I'll reorder those in what I think the priority is and get that to you. I was actually working on the minor drainage projects, and I gave you a copy of that this afternoon. So I didn't get as much of the major ones, but like I said, I think I do need to reorder this a little bit based on the priority of what's most important to the city. insofar as our infrastructure, not what we've necessarily heard the most about or what costs the most.
Perfect. I think that's real important for the budget discussion coming up, so that not only see the priority of the projects, but the cost with it, so that we can see if we're balancing. Similar to the ramp, just kind of like the ramp does, quite frankly.
Okay.
You hit exactly what I was gonna say, that this is all gonna shake out with the budget process. We certainly have a lot of, items for the budget that we have to balance, whether it is road programs, drainage, parks, police, town hall, you name it. We've, only got so much, and I'll just keep echoing that for every combined $1 million of payroll, we get $10,000 from income tax, so.
Roads
Some
and-
things are gonna take a long time to get to and do.
Roads and drainage are very important.
Yes.
Right, gotcha.
I agree, as we go through and we talk about the drainage, I would like to see a program exactly like the ramp. We need to prioritize it, we need to, and we need to start knocking it out based on, the worst area. We can't get any more behind than we already are, they're popping up everywhere.
They
Especially
are,
with
and
9 inch, especially with heavy rains and
Yeah, it's,
certain months.
heavy rains, and they are popping up everywhere, and there's stuff that has, it's just like we were with the roads years ago with deferred maintenance, that we've gotta get this stuff done, take care of it. I think it may end up leading to a smaller road programs per year, but something we've gotta balance and try to figure out and how we can fund this stuff and come up with the right balance of it all.
Great, that sounds good. Alan?
So a couple things to add to this. One, there's one that's not on here that I've recently been alerted of, and that is Blanche Edition.
You're talking about summary of the minor drainage report? Which
No,
one?
This
Which
is a
one are you
major
on?
one, I'm
This
still
is
on a
major.
major. So I have not added it to it yet, it's the Blanche Edition. There was a report done in, actually, there was a report done in 2004. There was roughly a 6-phased approach to getting that done. Some of the, I wanna say 2 of the phases were actually completed. However, there was some neighboring property concerns that got in the way, I guess, of completing that project. And I believe there's a Mr. Dills who lives on corners of Connors and Adams, might be coming in this evening for the for the council meeting to express his concern about standing water that runs through the ditch line in the back of his property. So we'll be adding that to the major drainage projects list and having a summary of that. The other thing, before I jump into the minor projects, and before we jump into that, is I've of course had the stormwater utility and been beating the drum of stormwater issues. And part of that is, I think we're starting to make progress on some of our stormwater issues, as you'll see, partly with the minor drainage projects and too with starting engineering and design on the Graham Road and getting those things in the budget, is that we do have a number of issues, but it takes away from, the roadway programs every time we have to fund a stormwater issue. So that's certainly the reasoning I was using to beat that drum, is because if we fund these using our normal budget, then that's less roads that we can take care of. So that's all I have on the major drainage specifically.
Okay. Anything on?
I'll just say there will be more through the budget process as we work on this.
Okay, that's probably a promise, right?
Yes.
Figured it. Okay. Anything else on major or minor?
Well, the minor.
Let's go to the minor while we're here.
Okay, so I've given you a summary here of several drainage projects. And when I originally reported this and created the document roughly March of 2018, that list was roughly what it is now. However, as you flip through this, of course each one has a summary of apparent cause and a solution. You'll notice that roughly 70%, we'll say, are gray. Those are ones that we have already taken care of within the budget this year. So they're either complete or believed to be complete with the efforts that we've already made. So there's a few outstanding. There's a couple that we're still planning to get to this year as we can get to them. And so we're definitely making progress, and more than I had realized that we had made as I went through these and outlined them and then worked with Jason to implement them as the years gone by. So happy to answer any specific questions. I know you really haven't had much time to look at that.
There's one that I remember talking about, that we were going to facilitate some trunk line ditch to be put in, and the 2 or 3 residents were going to do their own drainage. This was over off of Summit, if I remember correctly.
Backing up to whatever that,
Yeah, and I don't remember more details than that. Is that on this list,
Klima,
you,
is
Aaron,
that what
or
it
Alan?
is?
Is that on this list?
Yeah, it's Summit Road right across from the elementary school.
Right,
That's
and
what I
I
wanna say it is, yeah.
That's actually number 7 on the current major projects list.
Oh, major projects list.
And
Did you give us a major projects list
yes,
previously, or with this bunch?
previously, not
Okay,
this
so
one.
that's
I don't have that written down.
And the status of that was, effectively, that was a private property issue. It was in the backs, and the last conversation we had with the residents was that they needed to basically agree that they would install the feeder line and agree to get that across each other's property. And if they
I
would
didn't know
agree
if
to
you-
that, we would install the trunk line.
I didn't know if you were considering that major or minor.
No, that was in the major list.
I think that's major considering what it entails.
Got it. Okay.
I would say this is, it's encouraging to see the number of issues that we've been able to address. Especially, a number of the residents who just had issues here and there, who, constantly have their basement flooding or something, and to see that there were some relatively minor things that could be done to resolve those issues for them. So I do appreciate, I know that this is, this whole thing is overwhelming when it comes to the drainage.
Well, like I said, I was surprised as I was typing this up and talking with Jason, and from what the list was to what we've actually completed. I mean, of course, I knew what was going on, but when I saw it on paper, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah,
The one comment on the Columbia Road, Doc Holman.
Yes.
Just seeding and mulching, whenever you guys can get in there, do that. I'm sure you'll keep your ditch, or you'll keep your new tile from getting clogged up.
We'll lay some straw matting after it has some time to settle out a little bit.
Okay. So next steps on that one, I think, it would just be to revise the priority with costs
For,
for the major and minor.
yes.
So that for budget purposes, yes.
Budget purposes, we'll see that start to play out in the 5-year CIP that's identified in the budget.
Okay. Anything else on that, Mel?
No.
All right. Next one is the Broadview Crossing drainage, since we're on drainage. The question I had there was regarding the approval from the foundation to do either a swale or a pipe. Have we seen anything? Do you guys know if we've seen anything yet from the foundation?
Yes, and Brian will be signing it tonight. I shared it with Brenda. They've approved a 30-foot wide easement for construction and a 10-foot permanent easement for swale.
And is that, one last question, and that's an easement to the city, correct? Is that for our maintenance purposes?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay. So just for qualification, the owners would be, or the residents would be installing it, and then we would be required to maintain it.
We would
mow
maintain it moving
essentially.
forward. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So they would install it, we would maintain it moving forward. Like I said, it's 30-foot temporary for construction and then 10-foot permanent.
Is there any kind of plan required for that? Do they need to supply anything to the city? Do they need to supply anything to the foundation for a plan?
No. Job's put together a plan for the swale.
Okay.
They wanted an exhibit to see what the slope and everything would be. Job's put that together where it would be and everything, shared that with them,
Great.
approved, and like I said, Brian needs to sign as to form. I've signed already and had it notarized, and then be shipped off tomorrow to the foundation to
Sounds like
authorize.
get to check that one off take that one off the list.
Yes, we can.
That's good. Very good. Okay.
Well,
Anything-
not until
No.
everything's to the foundation.
Yeah,
We can-
right, well, okay. Sounded like they were pretty accepting, they were pretty understanding
Yes, they
and
were.
allowing. So, Mel, do you have anything else on that?
No.
No? Okay. Number 8, Broad Mink 2. This is, a question was this was the additional work that was approved through the supplemental. Just if you could give us a schedule for completing the signal work. I saw in your report that they have provided, sounded like they have provided you a schedule.
They've not provided me a hard copy of the schedule, but talking with the Shelley's representative today, actually, he would say within the next month, they were actually gonna start today, but somebody had taken the bolts for their pole foundations in the last 3 years, as they've been sitting around. So they had new bolts on the way, should be here tomorrow, I think, so they'll be starting either tomorrow or Wednesday, and within the next month, they should have all of that work complete, including the signal and the clearing of the lot.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we can.
I just see, change order status been signed, submitted, obviously, since they're proceeding. I know Shelley plans to get in there, talking to Alan to, complete their stuff, so Complete General can get in, wrap up, and then Shelley will be back to finish grade, do everything.
I know you had mentioned some storm drains that they had put in or something along those
Well,
lines.
I recall there was some need to do some grading for some storm work,
Okay.
but don't hold me to that as we sit here today.
One last question on that. When they backfilled the basement, is that something that they compacted, or is that something they just kinda put in there and just graded it off?
I don't think all that work is done yet.
No, well, no, I mean, they did get a good portion of it done. It looked like
They
it's pretty
did.
level.
They did.
So I just wondered if they put any compaction effort on that, or if we received any kind of reports on that.
I doubt we got any reports. I would assume they compacted it. I will check with the.
Okay.
with
It's
our
just for
inspector
future
to make
use, if
sure.
you ever wanna get in there, you don't have a hole that's uncompacted, or for settlement purposes.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, cause they'll hold
Because we have
water.
that with that and the swimming pool area.
Well, you'll have a swimming pool area again. Yeah.
And
Okay.
there is some additional drainage to be, a swale
Thank
needs to be
you.
put in across the front of that.
Thank you. Slightly.
Mel, you have anything on that? Good, just as soon as we clean that corner up, I mean, it's the reason why I bring that up and kinda focus on it a little bit is, as the comprehensive plan discussion's going through, you know, they keep talking about corners and entry points and stuff like that, and that's really one of them. Broad Street definitely is one of them, and it's looked bad for a while, so if we can get that cleaned up, that'd be great.
I will just say with that corner, with Mink Street that is currently under construction, with Main Street, with Taylor Road, can't wait to get these long projects behind us and move on to new stuff that we certainly are gonna be able to, I feel, manage in a much better way.
Understand.
Amen.
All right, so Depot Street, I'm going on to number 9. Depot Street parking. Can you give us an update on either one? Give us an update on
Well,
that.
I would just ask, I wasn't here at the last street committee, what exactly is?
So what's going on?
And Alan explained it to me already, I just wanna hear from the
Sure.
committee, what is the issue?
So, what I understand, and one of our Suzanne, who's very involved in hearing about this, there are some issues with 2-hour parking, 2-hour limited parking down there, and it's not being observed because the apartment complex, I'm gonna give you what I understand of this, the apartment complex doesn't have adequate parking for their residents, and those residents are parking out on the street in front of commercial businesses. And the question is there 2-hour parking there or not? And if there isn't, that's gonna be very detrimental to the businesses, obviously, to keep parking spots available on the street. Is that how you understood it, Alan?
That's how I understood it.
Yeah, so they're just trying to figure out how to make that all work down there, and whether or not we have to address that with you. Sounds to me, in my opinion, like this is something we need to address with the apartment owner, the complex owner themselves, to make sure that they have adequate parking. And this wasn't a problem until apparently a property transferred.
We have businesses opening up.
Yep, and business opening, but before the businesses actually started opening up, per se, there was a property.
And that's what I meant by
Yeah.
transferring, so.
Yeah, there was a property that was owned, that was people were allowed to park in, and that relieved the parking problem, I guess, to some degree. And now that it's owned by somebody else and that parking has been cut off, this on-street parking is is causing a problem with the owners, or businesses, so that's the question there.
So what we've done so far is, working with Jobs, we've tried to identify if there is before we talk about, I guess, whether it should be or shouldn't be, is if there's any other parking that we might be able to make available, or if there is something available, if we can make some changes to make more parking available. And running a few different scenarios, we were able to come up with, if we say went one way on Depot Street just for looking for alternatives, we were able to come up with one additional parking spot. So I don't think there's much that we can do that's gonna be worthwhile, at least to add parking. The only other place right there is actually on Wood Street northbound, just south of Depot. There's an area that we didn't mark out for striping when we paved Wood Street. We marked the other side, we striped it out for parking, but we did not mark that out, but it's a bus route. So technically, there isn't any no parking signs, so people could park there, but we didn't stripe it out because we didn't want to invite people to park there, either because of the bus route. So I guess from what we've looked at, it really comes down to, do we want it to be a 2-hour parking, which I think is probably a good thing for the businesses down there, and then it would come down to an enforcement issue if we do want to maintain it as 2-hour parking.
It is currently marked as 2-hour parking, has been for as long as I can remember. There is certainly the city lot that is on Front Street, east of 310, that's available for folks. It's not a very far walk, although it could be inconvenient for some, but, there on Depot Street, there's just really nothing to accommodate apartment.
Do you allow overnight parking in the city parking? I can't remember if there's a sign there that says.
There's not,
There's no
I think it's
there's no sign for
That's
that.
unlimited parking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. I don't know.
I mean,
Obviously-
2-hour parking, if it's gonna be 2-hour, it's gonna be enforced.
Yeah.
Cause if not, it's just gonna be where we are right now, and as we continue to have businesses open in the downtown area, parking becomes a premium for those folks, and it sounds like there are some who are just using it as all the time parking.
Do you think it's worthwhile to talk to the apartment owner, the apartment complex owner, just kind of give him a heads up that maybe he needs to help with the
I do.
solution? Yeah, okay.
Well, I think it's heads up, help with the solution, and it may start to be enforced.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna ask, so if we talk to the apartment owner, is there any place for them to go to make additional parking available to the tenants? So how, as far as the actual complex management or the owner or whatever, is it practical to hold them responsible if there's no place additional for them to offer? That's what I wanted to know. And is it practical, have we talked to the chief as far as enforcement is concerned? Is that something that,
I will tell you, I haven't been down there to look at it enough to tell you whether, the first thing I would think of is some kind of angular parking to try to densify it. Yeah, but I'm sure that, that takes space, that takes room to do. There's, short of them purchasing a sizable, parcel that's empty and putting in a parking lot, I don't know, I don't have a lot of good answers. I can see what will happen is they'll be parking over the municipal pool all night. They'll find places to park, they will, they have to.
Well, it's a double-edged sword because we also don't wanna hold or harm a business owner with
Yeah.
apartments, but if apartments are coming in today, they would have to meet our parking code to make sure they had enough
Exactly.
spaces per
Well,
resident.
Suzanne she told me a story about the hairdresser down there and how they can't find a place to park.
It certainly is hampering downtown businesses.
Yes. So,
Yeah, and this is the first time you said you've heard about it? This is
I
probably.
think just the
No, no, no.
definition, I think we had talked about
I
it.
had missed it at the last streets committee meeting,
Okay.
so I just asked for a
And
rundown
I
of what it
missed
was.
it
I
at
had
last
talked-
streets committee meeting too, but if it's something that we need to look at, obviously. Cause I'll tell you right now, we probably have, cause we weren't getting any complaints, but if it needs to be enforced, we'll enforce
The
it.
complaints are coming.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what Suzanne's hearing them. Alan, I don't know if you've heard them, but they're definitely, the businesses down there are having problems.
Okay.
I have not heard anything from over on the west side of Depot. I have heard stuff from on the east side of Depot around Jefferson, where there's a couple businesses over there where, especially during snow removal, people would shovel out an area, they thought it was theirs, people would park there.
Hmm.
So as part of this, with those complaints in mind, we've looked at, is there any other places in the downtown area where we can provide for parking? And there's really just not any vacant land. Because I also looked at what we could do for parking during the street fair, because that's obviously a problem. And we've come up with a couple ideas to add some gravel parking lot at the water treatment plant, just south of the river. And then at the BMV, there's some available land that's kind of wooded next to the river there, where another government entity, maybe they would be interested in working with us to provide some additional parking there. But that's really just for major events like the street fair. It's not going to help out on a day-to-day basis.
Well, when we just stick mountain issues, we know that there's probably gonna be a building built on the vacant lot just south of the tracks, so, they'll be bringing people in as well.
Okay, well, that's another one to,
I do think it's important to maintain the 2-hour parking there, though.
I agree.
Hear ya.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. Okay, anything else on that? Mel, do you have anything else?
I wanted to talk about TS Tech.
Yeah,
That one,
so, all right, go ahead. Do you wanna start?
I mean, we've gone through this one a couple of times. I've talked to the chief, and my opinion has changed. I don't think that we should allow them the ability to exit there. I think they need to go through their main entrance with a traffic control device, like they have been. I understand that they get backed up, but the chief made a really good point about, all we're allowing them to do is kind of divert the traffic control and feed into the traffic that's already flowing, and that is, it has a number of issues. I'll say that there has been, and I've tried to go that way, places I normally try to avoid because of the traffic. I've intentionally gone there at different times, and the times that TS Tech would be letting out there, and there is a pretty decent traffic backup between Broad and the tracks on Taylor. And I don't know, I mean, you can't see, so I know it's not a train, and it's been 3 different occasions now that it's happened to me, and you're trying to see, like, is somebody backing into their driveway? I mean, the heck's going on up there? But you can't, I don't know. But it's already pretty backed up, so based on my conversation with him and some of the things I've seen recently, just experience, I hate to have to go back to them and tell them otherwise, or cause them any
Let me
inconvenience.
ask Alan a quick question, because I want, what is the status of the TS Tech request?
So right now, it's closed. If you don't mind, I wouldn't mind giving a brief history, but I think,
I'll let Alan do it.
I'm itching right now, but go ahead.
Go ahead, Alan.
so what we've got here is that they'd originally come to us and asked, hey, can we open this up? And their original request was emergency access. And we said, hey, that makes sense, meet some stipulations, and we gave them this condition of approval for emergency access. And then they started breaking that and allowing cars to come out, and we caught them, and we said, hey, you're in violation. Of course, the first time they were kind of contentious, but then we gave them a letter that said, hey, you're gonna be coming into court if you don't get this taken care of, and then they closed it. So then they've been trying to, get us to go back on that and open this up. And we said, well, if you do a traffic study, we can at least look at that, and if you can validate, then maybe we'll allow it. So they did the traffic study, and, according to their traffic study, it's not gonna be an issue, specifically, but I don't disagree. We've always said that, administratively, that it's not appropriate and doesn't need to happen. So I have no issues with, what you've stated.
I just think we have enough traffic flow issues. I mean, we just, spent a substantial amount of time discussing that.
Well, I think we also gave them some other things we were commenting to, and they rejected those items or ideas, so okay. So right now, the status is that they are not using it for an exit at all.
They're not using it for an exit, and then BJ had drafted the approval for limited use, which we could, I guess.
But that was only a draft.
That was a
It's only
draft,
draft
knowing
that's
that
not
this
been
was coming
provided.
back to the street committee as we talked about.
Okay, well, what do you, go ahead.
And I will say, right now, we had our zoning inspector take a look, and that driveway right now that, to Taylor is nothing but,
Which is,
semi-truck after semi-truck, with no semi attached to it, just
Oh,
trailers.
yeah, it was a storage yard.
Yeah, it's a storage yard right now, so.
Probably doesn't, oh, yeah, yep, okay.
It wasn't like that all the time.
They had them lined up on one side, but now it's three
Now it's back.
across. and-
Yeah, cause I've
or four
watched
across,
the
three
past.
across.
Well, to echo Alan's comments, from day one, we have not been in favor of this from our administration. We did say, hey, we'll take this to the committee. We've tried to work with them, told them, they came to us and talking about the emergency access. We understood that, started to be abused. I just don't think it's a good idea right there with, Taylor Road, how narrow it is with residences down through there. Just not a good idea.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, err on the side of what's best for the residents in that area. I just don't, I know if I lived there, I wouldn't be happy with it, so,
Okay, do you want any kind of,
I would like a
Motion from
recommendation
us?
from the committee about, so we can go back. It's certainly committee recommendations and, direction carries some weight.
are we still going to allow them the emergency access? I mean, which, is that as,
I would say if it's emergency access, it has to have some sort of breakaway ballards there, that if somebody does need to get in there, they'd be able to. I think that's a reasonable thing, because if not, if we just say an emergency access, they're gonna start using it again like they did before to abuse it, in my opinion.
you
So-
guys are the experts, I would go with your recommendation on
I
that.
think breakaway ballards is gonna keep people from using it every day, or something similar to that.
yeah, cause they just didn't bother, we told them to lock the gate and such, and they obviously didn't adhere to that.
What's a breakaway ballard?
oh, just it's
Just a
a,
pole that you can run over and
Yeah.
it'll fall.
it's
Oh,
like a
the
sign
kind that
that'll
flop up and
break,
down.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, you
I
hit
got
it.
you.
so. Or even reboundable, whatever.
Whatever we wanna do, yeah.
Okay, do you wanna make a motion?
I'll make a motion that, I don't know how I should phrase it, that the only, access or egress that we should allow for TS Tech to Taylor Road is emergency with, the breakaway ballards in place as administration recommends. Good enough?
I think adequate infrastructure is recommended by, or accepted by the administration.
Yes.
I'll second that,
Walther,
yes.
Carter,
Yes.
All right, anything else on, you may have that would be, properly in front of the committee?
The only thing, and we might not have it yet, do we have a time frame about the trail construction on Taylor Road?
I have a pre-construction meeting with ODOT tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and I will know more after that.
Okay, could you just email me and let me know a time frame? Because I'm meeting with a couple of the homeowner association, trustees from various places, and I've gotten some questions, so as I distribute information, I'd like to include that on there, and I will tell them it's tentative, but it's kind of an idea.
And I will say
appreciate it.
that ODOT is still 100% confident that that'll be done this year. Well, actually, TrueCo gave me that information, but they said, yeah, there's no problem getting it done this year,
Okay.
just clarifying. But yes, I
Cause
will.
we might have to
forward
put
this schedule.
like.
We'll have a
some-
schedule tomorrow from ODOT at Precon and Truco when it will occur.
Okay. Okay.
Would you mind just, can we forward that to the whole committee?
Absolutely.
That'd be great. All righty.
That'd be, I'd really appreciate that. I might need some witness protection or something in the budget if that doesn't go forward, so.
Life jacket.
That's all I have.
Okay, I've got a couple items. Alan, you had mentioned in your report, the OHM Bridge report the city received.
Yes.
Could we, is that something that you feel like this committee should know about or should have a copy of, that report?
So we get one every year. ODOT does it's funded by ODOT for that report. There was nothing of import, I guess, in the one from last year that was done in 2017. we got that, early in 2018. Should be another one being done this year. If you'd like to see that, I'd be happy to forward it on. We had also looked at, the consultant that did that had mentioned something about trying to break that down and give us a little bit better information as far as maintenance or what we should be doing to help with that in the
Recommendations.
future, to do that in the future. That was not really affordable in this year's budget. It's something that I would like to do next year with this year's report once we get that. But yeah, I'd be happy to forward that on.
Okay. Thank you. And then the next one is, I was asked, Mill Street, and I may have brought this up to you, BJ. The Mill Street, there by 310, that we were waiting on the water line to be reconstructed there.
Yes.
And then Mill Street was gonna be rebuilt in that area, just kind of as a finalizing of the Main Street project and Township Road and so forth. We had put that section off. Is there any update that you would know of, or can we find out maybe for the next committee meeting, an update on that for, go ahead.
We can, you're talking about 310 to Township,
Correct.
essentially. So, street committee, street department, public service department would like to repave that. That being the case, there is a very old water line in there that needs replaced and services pulled off of it. Having talked to Nate, or put onto the new one, off the old one, talking to Nate, it is not a project that he can afford or get done this year. So that'll probably end up being a 2019 project in his CIP to have that done. And then Mill Street will be done in 2019 for repaving.
Under the ramp or
Yeah.
under?
Under the
part
ramp.
of his
Under the ramp.
project, under
Yeah,
ramp.
we cannot stress out his budget anymore in the water. It'll have to be done as part of the ramp.
Okay.
And originally, that was included in this year's ramp, but it looks like we'll have to non-perform that. So yeah, the existing water main's there, he just has to transfer the services, tear up a good amount to do that, and of course, we wouldn't wanna pay before he does that. The good news, I guess, on this is, he also has to do at the intersection of Township, Creek and Mill, there's some work that's gotta be done there. He is gonna be able to get to that before we do the ramp, so at least the intersection will be done this year, and it'll just be that stretch of Mill between the intersection there and the intersection with 310. And I think the repairs that we had done with our paver that we did last year are holding up
Oh,
pretty
yeah,
well,
they-
so that's the other good news on that.
Yeah, and the question wasn't that it was falling apart, it was that an expectation of when that might be done. And so that follows up with my next part about the street, the ramp.
Yes.
So, I know we've gotten, some updates on the ramp, and, will you take just a couple minutes to give us, I know you got the bids back. Shelley Company's the low bid.
Correct.
How many other bidders did you get in that?
One, that was
So we have
Decker.
2 bidders total.
Yes.
Okay.
4 people picked up plans, which was Columbus Asphalt Paving and Kokosing, Decker and Shelley. Decker did put in a bid. We opened them first and they came in at $740,000 and we were all a little scared. But Shelley's bid came in at $627,000, which is less than 10% over the engineer's estimate and 23,000 less than our budgeted amount. And then with the non-performing of Mill Street, we'll have a little bit of savings there.
And you said there's also a striping
And
discount.
Yeah, during the bid process, Griffin alerted us that the striping that we have called out for the chip seal road, the roads is the best striping that you can do. However, as soon as we plow that, we would rip it off with the plows, and they recommended a lesser product that would hold up better under plowing. And that's a roughly a $15,000 savings that we should expect with that. We didn't do an addendum, just let that ride, but we do expect that change order to be coming as part of this.
So the first question I have for it is, under the scope,
Yes.
did this include all of Headley's Mill?
No.
Okay, so this we went to the Patterson plan? Or-
We did halfway, which is roughly halfway between Allward and Quarter.
Okay.
And that will be,
Does
sorry, go ahead.
it include any of patching work in the other half?
No.
Okay.
So this year it included 2% of base repair, roughly 35% mill and fill, and then a double chip seal and striping on that whole 2 miles. And then presumably next year we would do the other half of Headley's Mill, the same way.
You'd given it, I know I didn't put this on the agenda, so maybe for the next, Streets Committee meeting, could you give us a breakdown between, you had done, an option 1, option 2, option 3 type of thing?
Uh-huh.
We had talks about Dixon Road being
Yes.
included, not included, we had a bunch of different discussion points to it. Could you give us a scope and kind of compare to what option that you ended up fitting it to? I guess that's the best way, so we know for next year ramp, what the next, lineup will be for next year ramp. Yes, Bridget?
Sorry, but certainly, there were a couple alternates that were in there, in the bid, we can send that out. My anticipation is that we'll be bringing legislation to council at the August sixth meeting, seeking authorization to proceed with the ramp. We'll get that out to the committee beforehand, all of council as well, if need be.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about, right, Mel, with we had that,
We had like
we had a
list
booklet
of-
where we had different options and what was gonna be potentially done
Yeah.
in-house, what's gonna be done through the ramp.
Where we're gonna
I
use our
could tell you what
savings,
date it was
basically.
here if you give me 2 minutes, but I imagine you remember that one. So, if we can just get an update on that one to what the bids
Cause we were
actually.
yeah, some of the alternates were like, there was some on Dixon, there was, Cleveland Road, there
Yeah.
was, Headley's Mill, some, yeah.
The alternates that we ended up putting in were Dixon and the other half of Headley's
And-
Mill.
Right.
And both of those came in, I wanna say around 250,000 each for Shelley to do those. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd just like to add to
Right.
that, when we're looking, we really need to evaluate where Cleveland Road is on the list for the ramp.
And we have just recently started, this past Friday, going through, and because the ramp's a 2-year cycle, so we're updating, looking at all the roads. We'll be doing that over the course of hopefully we can get finished in the next month
Okay.
and get that updated, so we can look at where
That's-
everything's at.
That's rough.
And the other thing that I wanted to mention, which I'll mention in council as well, is after we decided to do Headley's Mill, early this year, I went through with Jason and we realized that there are, I wanna say 12 corrugated metal culverts on Headley's Mill that are in pretty bad shape. 6 of them are in the section that we're doing this year. We found a way, working with Spenco, who did the culverts on Taylor and Cable Road, to work together and got really good prices, honestly, through them with using our dump trucks and them doing the work, because they're a little bit deeper and or larger than we are comfortable doing. So we're gonna get that done this month, hopefully in the next 2 weeks. We'll be closing sections of Headley's Mill at different times. They're hoping they can do all 6 of them in 3 days. So we should get in, get out, and get that a chance to settle before we do the roadway improvements on Headley's Mill. And then we'll probably look to do the same thing on the next section of Headley's prior to next year's ramp.
When we start talking about getting the repairs underway too, just a reminder, when we're looking at cable, if we could try to coordinate that with the district, the school district. School starts August 15th, so it's not gonna happen before school starts.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe we can look at, I know there's a long weekend, or maybe it's just teachers and then they could use the main road entrance, or, something along those lines.
Well, and of course, somebody at the school thought we were doing that section of Summit Road from Broad Street to the tracks. They thought we were gonna do that on August 15th. I got a call about that, and I informed them, no, we're not gonna do it on the first day of school, don't worry about that. But I had
Well,
not
why would-
considered Saturday work. That's something that maybe the Shelley Company would be willing to work with us and do both of those, the Cable Road chip seal and Summit Road paving as Saturday work. We can certainly ask the question.
Okay. That's
That report that I was talking about, Alan, was the one you did for your for the March 12th Streets Committee meeting, and I think you did a kind of a larger breakdown of that. I don't see a date on it, but I'm gonna assume this one was the week just, or the meeting just before that.
The major drainage projects?
No, the
We're talking
ramp-
about
It's called 2018 Ramp Additional Work Assessment.
Yes.
That was
Okay.
that was given to us the meeting before the 12th, and I don't have the date necessarily. And then we had another one where you revised it on the 12th for more of a summary of what the ramp was gonna go out for bid. So if we just get kind of
I'll take a look back,
Perfect.
see.
And you're looking for, well, basically what we decided to do for Headley's Mill, and then what was it on the other ones?
Well, you'd had this, so this summary of the options essentially, and you have a summary is of 2018 ramp review. You have Headley's Mill option 1, 2, 3, 4, Summit Road, Mill, Creek. And then as we talked about, there was also the Cable Road, and then there was this potential Dixon alternate. And just, I guess, understanding which option you went with on Headley's Mill, and then if any of the other streets fit into the budget through the bidding process, and how far off they might have been if they didn't.
Comparing that with what we actually are
Exactly.
gonna award.
Exactly, and I'm more than happy to show you.
Okay, no, I know what you're talking about now that you specified that. And
Yep.
so Cable Road, we did get that in the base bid for a single chip seal just to hold that road together while the district, the Water and Sewer District does their water line project, and while the school does their school project. So that should hopefully hold that road together in the meantime, and then we'll see what needs to be done to Cable Road after that. So that is in the base bid. Yeah, the second half of Headley's and the second half, or both halves of Dixon, those were the alternates, and I will get you information on that. And the option that we did for Headley's was more or less the option I think we all discussed in here and decided on, which was that a little bit of base repair, some surface repair, and the double chip seal to be a good balance of longevity versus immediate cost.
Okay.
And I've got a couple other things that I can run through really quick. If first of all, Graham Road stormwater project. All the agreements are signed on that. Survey is going to start this Wednesday. Should run 4 or 5 days depending on the weather. And the surveyors did had them put out door hangers to let people know what they're doing. So that is getting started. I did provide we had Job's put together a list of general engineering items that have been completed so far this year. Provided that to you as the last thing in the packet that I handed you. They've been pretty busy this year. Of course, a lot of the Project Oriole stuff I think is carried that budget a little bit further than we had anticipated. Anyways, just there's an update on that. Happy to answer any questions on it. Ming Street Phase 2, work has begun. There was a recent meeting that we actually didn't get invited to with ODOT and the Shelley Company to decide what was going to be done this year. The Shelley Company worked 2 schedules, one with working overtime to get it done this year, and one with working their normal, 50-hour week to see what they could get done this year. And the option that was chosen was doing phases 1 and 2 this year, not completing the surface course of asphalt, and then doing phase 3 next year, and then the final surface course of asphalt on the entire roadway. So part of this will be pushed till 2019. I would expect that there will be some additional cost because of that. That's about as much as I know right now.
Was there any reason why we weren't invited to that one?
I don't know.
Okay. We write our agreements where we have to be invited to meetings?
Our project, we should be invited to meetings.
That's what I'm getting to, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. As far as the phase 1 and 2, I'm assuming that's underground and your intermediate, is that an intermediate course that's gonna be on the
They'll
road?
bring it all the way up through intermediate.
Okay.
Yes.
All right,
And that's from the tracks from just south of the tracks to Columbia Road. Phase 3 will be Columbia to the bridge north of Higgins.
okay. So I guess what I would ask is just, can we have our maintenance guys look at what that phase is gonna take to keep it together for the winter? I guess it's in pretty bad shape. So, I mean, drainage, if we've gotta put some, what I guess I'm worried about is the drainage out there and potentially where the utilities have come through and really haven't, their mounds or, their extra dirt's there, whatever the case may be. Just making it safe for winter, I guess. I know it's not under full traffic, but
Yeah, and maybe we can do some more drag patching to hold that together too.
got it.
last thing that I have, Tesla Safe Travel Plan, the pedestrian facilities. I know that one of the previous three committees have given you a packet that broke that down into the 4 phases. And then we've actually got and that had, sorry, backing up here, that had construction cost estimates. Since then, we've got some information from Jobs to look at as far as engineering cost estimates. And they've actually broken that down into phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and then combining phases. That is something that we have, I wrote this down, but I don't remember where. We do have money in this year's budget, I think it's $50,000 for design. And then we actually had money for implementation this year. I don't foresee that happening likely at this point. At least if there's any kind of right-of-way acquisitions we would need, but we did have, I wanna say 60,000.
I was saying 65, I thought it was 65.
For any construction, so I guess trying to keep that moving forward and look at what phases we wanna try and design, with the one caveat, I don't think we wanna get too far ahead and design something that we're not gonna be able to construct within the next year, because you get problems with survey and having to dust off old plans, it ends up costing you more in the long run, so. Just, I guess, looking for feedback on that as we move forward.
Well, I'll tell you, probably want to dust that back off, Alan, as far as what the, if we can get a copy of the cost estimate and the phase 1 through phase 4 proposal on that one. I'm looking here pretty quickly through my stuff here to see if I've got any, if I've got that. I don't reckon, I went through this weekend, so I don't remember having that.
I remember seeing it,
We've,
and I
Yeah, there were
remember
4 phases.
being in favor of the order that you had it in.
Okay.
Cause we had talked about it a second time, I believe, and I felt like how you had prioritized it was the best way for it to go.
Okay.
I think the number 1 priority was the intersection down at, Broad and,
Broad and Main, the west intersection.
Yes.
Correct.
right,
And that one, for reference, had a $60,000 construction cost estimate, and to do survey and design would be, survey is 2,500, phase 1 design, about 7,000, provided we didn't need any other right-of-way or easements, which I'm pretty sure we do not. So that would be something that we could, at least phase 1, we could get engineering going, and I've got a copy of this here, Andy, if you wanna take a look at it real quick.
is this one you call Pataskla Crosswalk and Sidewalk Study?
That is correct.
That's what I got. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about something different. So, okay.
Okay.
Very good. This, I do have this.
yeah, no, I mean, I felt like how you had it prioritized was fine.
Well, if we wanna try and construct something this year, which we might still be able to do if we got design going for phase 1, and then phase 1 construction 60,000, which all that fits in our budget, we could get that going quickly if there's favor for that.
I would be in favor of that.
Well, I know that we had it in the budget for it, so I
Yeah.
would say that.
What's
that-
sorry, I don't have, what's the design cost for phase 1?
Roughly 2,500 for survey, and engineering was 7,000.
Okay.
And
My recommendation is we go ahead and get, design started, it's under 10,000, so we don't have to wait for council approval to do that, not saying that I'm trying to sidestep anything, but it certainly falls underneath, and then
Yes.
we can kick that off and, work towards getting a purchase order at least filed this year, so we can keep that money encumbered.
yeah, at least if we could get somebody, a contractor
Yep.
scheduled and get a bid, we could encumber that money, and even if we had to start it early next year, we could at least get that ball rolling.
Do you need anything from us in order to do that, or?
We don't, it's already in the budget, approved as a
Yeah.
budget. We'll have to come back to all of council and
Sure.
street committee once we put something out to bid and get bids. Seeking a recommendation for approval from street committee for those, but for design, we don't need anything.
That was everything that I had.
Mel, do you have anything else?
Nope,
BJ?
I do not, thank you.
All right. Motion,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
have a second?
Walther,
Yes?
Carter,
Yes.
Jim will get something to you.